Tonight we begin with a development that Pentagon officials had feared, Israeli intelligence had predicted, and the White House had desperately hoped to avoid. A move that unfolded not over weeks or months, but in 72 hours. 72 hours that reshaped the calculus in the Middle East. 72 hours that forced Trump's Pentagon onto high alert. 72 hours that exposed what Benjamin Netanyahu has been planning in secret for months. What Iran did this week crossed a line that the international community had hoped would hold, and when that line broke, Israel did not hesitate. They responded with precision, aggression, and a level of coordination that has left even seasoned analysts stunned. But here's what makes this story different from every other escalation we've covered. This time, Netanyahu's response wasn't reactive. It was planned. It was rehearsed. And according to sources now speaking to Western intelligence agencies, it was ready to deploy the moment Iran made its move. Tonight, we're going to break down exactly what happened, what Netanyahu's secret plan involves, why Trump's Pentagon is now on its highest state of readiness since the 2020 Soleimani strike, and what this means for the next 72 hours. Because what's unfolding right now isn't just another chapter in the Iran-Israel conflict. This is something else entirely. For 18 months now, there had been signals, not public statements, not official diplomatic cables, just signals, that Iran was preparing something unprecedented. Iran has been provocative, yes, but they have been calculated in their provocation. Their moves have followed a certain rhythm, a predictability, almost a script. But what set off alarm bells in Washington and Tel Aviv this week was that the rhythm went silent. Intelligence analysts who monitor Iranian nuclear activity know the indicators: the movement of centrifuge components between facilities, the rotation of scientists at Fordow and Natanz, the pattern of encrypted communications between Tehran and IRGC commanders, the sudden increase or decrease in inspection cooperation with IAEA monitors. All of that went quiet, and whenever Iran goes quiet, it means something is about to get loud. Israeli defense forces had been tracking what they internally referred to as pattern omega, a term used to describe the specific sequence of activities that would precede a breakout attempt. For months, that pattern had been dormant. Then, 72 hours ago, it activated, not gradually, not incrementally, all at once. And when that happened, a secure line between Tel Aviv and Washington lit up with a single coded message that has now been partially confirmed by sources at the Pentagon. Omega is live. Early Tuesday morning, Israeli intelligence detected what they described as unprecedented centrifuge activity at Iran's Fordow enrichment facility, including the installation of advanced IR-9 centrifuges that had not been operational in over 3 years. These are the kinds of machines that Iran only activates when they are signaling something very specific: a breakout timeline compression, a bargaining escalation, or preparation for weaponization. Western intelligence didn't know which category this fell into, or whether it fell into all three at once. But what they did know was that Iran was changing its nuclear posture. And when a threshold state shifts posture without explanation, even by small degrees, the Pentagon pays attention. What happened next is where Netanyahu's secret plan enters the picture. According to 3 sources familiar with Israeli military planning, 2 speaking to European outlets, 1 to American defense media, Israel had pre-positioned a response package months ago. This wasn't a contingency. This was a trigger-ready operation. It had a name, Operation Iron Covenant, and it had been waiting for exactly this moment. The warning issued by the Pentagon tonight was not normal. It was not routine. It was not symbolic. It was urgent. Senior officials after National Security Council meetings described Iran's move as provocative, destabilizing, and perhaps most importantly, inconsistent with any interpretation of peaceful nuclear intent. But provocation only works if the target hesitates. Israel did not. In fact, their response today was among the most coordinated and aggressive we've seen in the modern history of the conflict. Here's what we know. Within 6 hours of detecting the Fordow activation, Israel launched what sources are calling a multi-domain suppression operation across Syrian and Lebanese airspace. These weren't the usual airstrikes on weapons convoys. These were targeted surgical eliminations of command infrastructure. Systems that Israel only strikes when they are preparing to neutralize Iran's forward projection capabilities entirely. F-35I Adir stealth fighters, which Israel rarely acknowledges using, were detected operating in patterns consistent with deep strike mission profiles. Electronic warfare aircraft jammed communications across a 200-kilometer corridor, and cyber operations, still unconfirmed but strongly suspected, reportedly disabled portions of Iran's air defense coordination network. This was not a warning shot. This was a message. Tonight, Israeli Defense Forces confirmed that they launched precision strikes on 17 targets across Syria and Lebanon, including a recently activated Hezbollah coordination center in the Bekaa Valley that had been dormant for what analysts believe was operational security during the preparation phase. Israel struck before Iran could complete its escalation sequence. They hit forward missile depots, they hit communication relay stations, they hit logistics hubs that were likely preparing to support a broader Iranian retaliation capability. In other words, Israel targeted the connective tissue of Iran's regional network, the components that would have made a coordinated response operational. This is what made Washington's warning so urgent. Iran's nuclear move wasn't just symbolic, it was actionable. It represented the kind of threshold activity that could shift the breakout timeline from months to weeks if left unchecked. And Israel, understanding that fully, responded with force. Not recklessly, not impulsively, but strategically. They didn't strike Iran directly. They didn't target civilian infrastructure. They hit the nodes that connect Tehran to its proxies. They hit the systems that would enable retaliation. And according to Israeli military sources, they did so with near zero collateral damage, a claim that, if verified, would represent an extraordinary level of intelligence precision. And here's where the story becomes even more significant. U.S. intelligence officials now believe that Iran's latest move was designed to test the resolve of the Trump administration after signals of potential diplomatic re-engagement. Iran wanted to see whether Washington would counsel restraint, but instead, the opposite happened. The Pentagon didn't urge caution. They issued a readiness order that was so immediate, so comprehensive, that even Tehran noticed. You don't get Iran's attention easily, but today the United States and Israel did. Defense analysts speaking with Reuters under anonymity described Iran's shift as breakout signaling, a way to create leverage without technically crossing the weapons threshold. But Israel proved today that they remain both vigilant and willing to act preemptively. Their strikes were not only tactically effective, they were timed so precisely that Iranian-aligned forces had no opportunity to disperse high-value assets. That timing matters because it shows something critical about Israeli intelligence penetration. It shows that Israel is not merely reacting to Iranian moves. They are anticipating them. And in some cases, they appear to be inside Iran's decision cycle itself. As reports continued coming in throughout the evening, we learned more about the scale of Israel's response. The Israeli Air Force carried out over 40 sorties in a 6-hour window, forcing Syrian air defenses into continuous engagement mode until they were effectively exhausted. Israeli naval vessels targeted coastal infrastructure in Syria that had been upgraded in the last 90 days, infrastructure that analysts believe was intended to support Iranian fast-attack boat operations in the Mediterranean. Sayeret Matkal special operations units operating in locations that remain classified reportedly neutralized communications equipment used by Iranian Quds Force commanders to coordinate with Hezbollah leadership. This wasn't just an airstrike campaign. This wasn't just a show of force. This was integrated warfare. This was strategic degradation. And strategic degradation is the one thing Iran has struggled to counter since the Soleimani assassination. For every advance Iran has made in its regional network, Israel has countered with something that dismantles its connectivity, its coordination, and its confidence. Remember, Iran thought the Trump administration would be distracted by domestic priorities. They thought Netanyahu's coalition pressures would limit his military options. They thought international fatigue with Middle East conflict would create space for nuclear advancement. But tonight, the exact opposite is happening. The Trump Pentagon is more engaged than it has been in years. Netanyahu has unified Israeli political factions behind a security-first posture. And international observers, including European allies who typically counsel restraint, have remained notably silent on Israel's response. That silence is significant. It suggests that Western capitals understood what Iran was attempting, and it suggests they are not prepared to condemn Israel for acting first. What makes this moment so volatile and so consequential is that Iran's latest move happened at a time when Supreme Leader Khamenei is under extraordinary internal pressure. Hardliners want visible nuclear progress to justify decades of sanctions. Reformists want economic relief and a path back to international legitimacy. IRGC commanders want expanded regional influence and revenge for Soleimani. Moderates want stability and succession planning. Khamenei is balancing these demands while managing questions about his health and the future of the Islamic Republic itself. And when leaders in that position make sudden moves, they're not doing it from strength. They're doing it from pressure. They're doing it from vulnerability. That vulnerability, paradoxically, makes the situation more dangerous because a leader under pressure may calculate that provocation is safer than inaction. The Pentagon's readiness elevation, now confirmed through multiple channels, was designed to signal that the United States is not willing to allow nuclear threshold crossing without consequence. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said plainly that Iran's enrichment acceleration was inconsistent with any credible claim of peaceful nuclear intent. That is diplomatic language for, we know what you're doing and we're prepared to respond. You don't usually hear that tone from the Pentagon unless something serious is at stake. And tonight, something serious is at stake. The entire architecture of nuclear non-proliferation in the Middle East. Meanwhile, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the Israeli public in a brief, measured statement tonight. He said, Israel will not wait for threats to materialize. We act when action is required. He said, our intelligence services have penetrated every level of Iranian planning. They know what we know, and they know we will not hesitate. And he said, to our allies, we say thank you for your support. To our enemies, we say only this, test us at your peril. These are not rhetorical flourishes. These are statements from a nation that understands just how high the stakes have become. Here's what makes the situation even more concerning. Iran's latest move wasn't isolated. Along with the Fordow centrifuge activation, Hezbollah mobilized reserve units along the Lebanese-Israeli border. Houthi forces in Yemen test-fired a medium-range ballistic missile toward the Red Sea. Iranian-backed militias in Iraq increased drone reconnaissance targeting U.S. positions at Al-Assad Air Base. All of this happened within the same 72-hour window. When Iran moves multiple pieces at once, it means something larger is underway. It means Tehran is not acting impulsively. It means this was coordinated. And coordination at this level suggests strategic intent, not tactical improvisation. Intelligence analysts are now considering several possibilities. One is that Iran is preparing to announce a significant enrichment milestone, perhaps 90% weapons-grade uranium, as a fait accompli. Another is that Iran is attempting to create a crisis atmosphere to force the Trump administration back to the negotiating table. A third possibility, the one worrying officials the most, is that Iran is attempting to establish a new normal, where threshold nuclear activity becomes accepted reality. But today, Israel took that card off the table. They didn't issue statements. They didn't convene emergency UN sessions. They didn't wait for international consensus. They struck. And in striking, they demonstrated that Iran's new normal will be met with continuous degradation of the capabilities required to sustain it. What we're watching now is a test of resolve. Iran wants to see whether escalation leads to negotiation or retaliation. Israel wants to show that escalation leads only to consequence. The United States wants to prevent regional war while maintaining pressure, and the international community wants to prevent nuclear proliferation without triggering the very conflict non-proliferation was meant to avoid. These objectives are not fully compatible, and in the gap between them, decisions are being made that will shape the Middle East for decades. Tonight, we've heard from intelligence sources who are now monitoring Iranian command communications. They say there are signs of confusion within IRGC leadership about how to respond to Israel's strikes. They say Iranian air defenses in Syria have been significantly degraded, more than Tehran expected, and they say Iran's decision to activate Fordow was likely part of a broader pressure campaign intended to extract concessions from a Trump administration they believed would be reluctant to engage militarily. But Israel is not backing down. In fact, Israel is doubling down. Their response today, swift, coordinated, and devastating, sent a message to Iran that the rules have changed, and it sent a message to Washington that Israel will act with or without explicit American approval. As the night goes on, we expect more details to emerge about what exactly Iran hoped to achieve with this week's nuclear acceleration. But what we do know is that Israel's response was timely. It disrupted Iranian coordination before retaliation could be organized. It degraded proxy capabilities across multiple theaters. And it demonstrated that Netanyahu's government has prepared for this moment with a level of detail that suggests months, if not years, of planning. What happens next will depend on what Iran does in the next 48 hours. If they de-escalate, this moment will be remembered as a successful demonstration of deterrence. If they escalate further, Israel and the United States have already shown they are positioned to respond. They have shown they are ready. And tonight, for the first time in months, Tehran appears to be uncertain. The Supreme National Security Council is silent, too silent. And when Iran is silent, it means they are recalculating. It means they are choosing their next move carefully. Because tonight, Iran learned something they have learned many times before, but continue to underestimate. Israel's intelligence reaches deeper than Tehran believes. Netanyahu's resolve is stronger than his critics predict. And the Trump Pentagon is not the passive observer Iran hoped it would be. This story is far from over. But tonight, one thing is clear. Iran's nuclear gambit has been exposed. Netanyahu's secret plan has been activated, and the world is watching to see what happens next. And we will be here covering every detail as the next phase of this crisis unfolds.